Don't.
No what?
Don't give me hope.
So, in the weekend just past, Leeds and Burnley were confirmed to be promoted back to the Premier League. The remaining 4 teams that will play it out for the playoffs are yet to be decided, although Sheffield and Sunderland will be 2 of them. But for today, let's just focus on Leeds and Burnley. Now, for the last 2 seasons in a row, all 3 teams that have been promoted have been relegated again straight away. And in a video I made previously discussing this, the obvious answer for how to fix that is to distribute the money more evenly across the divisions. However, as I said in that video, that topic is very boring, very short to the point, and very unlikely to ever happen. And for that reason, I'd like to look at different factors to see if these teams could survive and what needs to happen for them to do that. Now, as you can probably tell by the title of this video, I don't see Burnley surviving. However, I think Leeds potentially could. So what are the things that need to happen in order for one of these teams to stay in the league? Well, let's start by learning from some of the mistakes of the previous 6 teams that have been there and went down. We'll start with Southampton and Sheffield. Now, these 2 teams were doomed from minute 1. Neither of their squads were good enough. And yes, it's true, they didn't have the money to properly invest to help fix these squads, but both of them had big problems going for them. In Sheffield's case, it was a fluke in my opinion that they even made it back into the Premier League. They were really poor in the Premier League when they were last there, before the season which they most recently got relegated. And their manager Paul Heckingbottom done an amazing job to get them second place to get promoted. But they had a championship squad with, in my opinion, a poor manager. I can remember Paul Heckingbottom from his time at Hibernian, and he must have been one of the worst managers I'd ever seen them have.
Yeah, you suck. Yeah, you just fucking suck.
To see him leave Hibs and then get Sheffield United promoted to the Premier League, I was amazed. But it all seemed like too much for Sheffield, a squad that was way too inexperienced, did not have enough depth, not enough quality, not enough firepower, and a manager who was completely out of his league. Sheffield just simply weren't cut out for it. Even if the money was distributed more evenly, I still don't think Sheffield had anywhere near enough to stay up. Southampton were kind of the same. Yes, they had more Premier League experience, they'd only been relegated for 1 season. However, their squad was really poor in terms of Premier League standards, and Russell Martin was an absolutely suicidal tactician. They left him in charge for way too long, and he'd done way too much damage by the time they eventually decided to part ways with him. All because he refused to stop trying to play out from the back, when he very clearly didn't have the requirements to do it.
Not a great plan.
Moving on to Ipswich and Luton, they had problems that Burnley and Leeds don't have. 2 seasons before Ipswich made it to the Premier League, they were in League 1, and 10 years before Luton made it to the Premier League, they were in the National League. I made this point in my video a few weeks ago. Sometimes it is just too much too soon. The ceiling was just too high for Luton, the ceiling was just too high for Ipswich. Luton have really struggled this year being back in the Championship, and I think Ipswich won't. I think Ipswich will do really well. I can see Ipswich coming straight back up. They have a good system in place with Kieran McKenna. However, not all fairy tales end happily, and for Luton it just didn't work, but they definitely done themselves proud. One of the teams that's just been promoted, Burnley, is our next case. Now, it's my opinion that Vincent Kompany genuinely betrayed Burnley.
Traitor!
He done amazingly to get them promoted. They were one of the best Championship sides we've ever seen. He came up to the Premier League, refused to change his tactics, kept playing attacking football. He knew what he was doing. Burnley never looked like surviving at any point. They got relegated, and at the first chance he left to walk into the Bayern Munich job. Vincent Kompany knew that 1 good season in the Championship and proving that he could still try and play attacking football even with a really poor set of players for that league, coupled with his name, him being Vincent Kompany, would pull him to other jobs. I personally don't think that Kompany even tried to keep Burnley in the league, because no manager with any tactical sense would have kept the same system the entire way through. Managers like to say nowadays, I won't change my system, I won't change who we are, but ultimately sometimes you need to for the betterment of your club. And that brings us to our last team, which is Leicester. Leicester have a lot of financial problems, sure. However, sacking Steve Cooper when he didn't have them in the relegation zone to appoint Ruud van Nistelrooy for me was just wrong. I'm not saying Steve Cooper would have kept them up. In fact, I don't believe Steve Cooper would. But I think Steve Cooper would have made a better job of it than Ruud van Nistelrooy. And if you're going to sack him, at least wait until he's actually in the relegation zone so you've got a reason to sack him. He didn't have Leicester there when he was sacked. And Van Nistelrooy has been absolutely terrible for Leicester. At one point, 15 losses from 16 games. 9 games without even scoring a goal. Van Nistelrooy wasn't the man. Now, at this moment in time, I don't think Leeds or Burnley have too many of those issues. Both teams have managers, Daniel Farke and Scott Parker, who are now into their 3rd promotion from the Championship. Farke has this one with Leeds and 2 previously with Norwich. And Scott Parker has got 3 different teams promoted, Burnley, Fulham and Bournemouth. These are clearly very good managers for the Championship. Yet they're never really given much of a chance in the Premier League. Now, it will be hard, but I do think both these managers absolutely deserve a chance to keep these teams up. But the next thing that needs to happen in order for one of these teams to stay up is someone's got to go down. Now, if you look at the teams from 13th down to 17th in the Premier League this season who have been very poor, these are the 5 teams I want to highlight. Now, unfortunately, no matter how funny it would be, United or Tottenham will not be relegated next year. Sorry to ruin the fun, lads, but it's just not going to happen. Now, based on this season, that leaves Everton, Wolves and West Ham. Now, the first thing I want to do is completely write out Everton. I think appointing David Moyes was a brilliant idea. He will steady the ship, he will slowly improve them, and Everton have very few players that are going to be poached by bigger teams, which means their squad is going to stay mostly intact. I don't for a minute see Everton being in any danger of getting relegated next year. Wolves or West Ham, however, could be different. We'll start with West Ham. After moving on from Moyes to Lopetegui, which was a horrible decision, and then getting rid of Lopetegui for Graham Potter, who is an equally bad manager, I don't see Graham Potter being in charge even at Christmas next year. I really don't rate him as a coach.
You surprise me to how shit you are. Maybe you shouldn't have quit your fucking day job so early.
West Ham obviously have a really big problem on their hands with signing a striker. There's talks that one of their star players, Lucas Paqueta, will probably be leaving. And you have to think at some point some of their other really good players like Jared Bowen and Mohamed Kudus might fancy a better challenge because they do have the quality to play for better teams that aren't going to be in a relegation battle next year. But ultimately, I think West Ham would need to have a really good summer in order to be clear of being in any question of relegation. I could definitely see them losing a lot of players this summer, and again, I do not rate Potter as a coach at all. So they're a team that could be within the mix. Moving on to Wolves, they're in a similar position. Wolves for the last 2 years have been everyone's outside shout to get relegated, and they're going to lose probably a lot of players this year. It's already confirmed that Matheus Cunha will be leaving. I wouldn't be surprised to see Nelson Semedo move on, as well as Ryan Aït-Nouri. They've still to actually sign Jurgen Strand Larsen on a permanent, and they could lose some other squad players as well. That would be an issue for Wolves, seeing as they're notoriously bad for having quite a thin squad. As well as this manager, Vitor Pereira has come in and done exceptionally well with them, but we've seen a lot of managers come in and really do well with that new manager bounce and go into a purple patch. He'll be tested next season to see if it was a purple patch or if he is actually this good as a coach for Wolves.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Wolves also have a lot of positions that need to be replaced. Now, in my opinion, I think if West Ham stick an entire season with Graham Potter, they are more likely to end up in a relegation fight than Wolves. However, I think these two teams are probably your best chance at having a relegation battle with one of the new teams that's promoted, as opposed to anyone else. Of course, a lot of teams are doing really well this season. Forest are still currently 4th. Bournemouth, Fulham, Brighton and Brentford and Crystal Palace all look completely safe and have all had really good seasons. Obviously things could go wrong next season and a team that you aren't expecting to be in a relegation battle could end up there. I don't think anyone expected West Ham to finish 17th this year. And that leads me back to the title of this video. We don't know who the third team's going to be. However, whether it's Sheffield, Sunderland, Bristol, Coventry, Middlesbrough, Millwall or Blackburn, I can't see any of those teams staying up. I don't think Burnley have it within them to stay up. However, I think Leeds could. I'm going to contradict myself here a little bit. I think short of an absolute disastrous season on par with Southampton, even if they're relegated, Burnley should keep Scott Parker. I don't know anyone Burnley could get that could potentially keep them up, short of doing something very radical like bringing back Sean Dyche. Scott Parker, after 44 games, has only lost twice and has only conceded 15 goals this season. Burnley look a really solid defensive team in the Championship. Now, they'll never be able to keep up those numbers in the Premier League, but hopefully he can instill something that could make them a rugged and hard team to beat. I think he'll have a really good go at staying up. I don't think Burnley will have enough, but I think even if he's relegated, he is definitely the man to bring them back up the next year. Unfortunately, that means Burnley will be a bit of a yo-yo team for a while, but there's no other escape at the moment for Burnley. Now, whether it's with Daniel Farke, and it probably won't be come the end of the season, I do think Leeds will give the best go of staying up. I think the new owners aren't here to keep the club in the Championship, they're here to break into the Premier League and stay there. I hope Daniel Farke is given a chance to actually do it, however, I wouldn't be surprised if at some point during the season Leeds move on from him. I think Leeds will really go all out to stay up next season, and I think it could be them that maybe do it. In all honesty, whether it's Leeds, Burnley or someone else, I just hope that someone breaks the cycle and manages to stay up. But that's just my thoughts on the recent promotion for Leeds and Burnley. Congratulations to both teams. I will be excited to see both of them in the Premier League next season. But what do you guys think? Please let me know in the comments below if you think either of these teams have a chance of staying up, or who you think could go down in their place. Thank you to everyone who's made it this far into the video, and I will see everyone else in the next one.